Have you ever wondered what happens when an obsessed fan crosses the line? When adoration turns into a deadly fixation? This isn't a fictional thriller, it's the terrifying true story of Rebecca Sheffer, a rising Hollywood star whose life was cut tragically short. This story will send a chill down your spine and make you question the price of fame. Rebecca Sheffer was a name on everyone's lips in the late 1980s. With her radiant smile and undeniable talent, she was quickly becoming one of Hollywood's brightest young actresses. She had just finished a successful sitcom, My Sister Sam, and was transitioning into more mature film roles. Her future was incredibly bright. She was on the verge of superstardom, with a major audition for The Godfather Part 3 just around the corner. But lurking in the shadows was a man whose obsession would bring her dreams and her life to a devastating end. This man was Robert John Bardo. From thousands of miles away in Tucson, Arizona, Bardo had become infatuated with Rebecca. At first, his fixation was like that of many fans. He wrote her letters, lots of them. He would watch her show religiously, collecting posters and articles. He even traveled to Los Angeles, hoping to meet her at the studio where My Sister Sam was filmed. He brought a giant teddy bear and a letter, but security turned him away. This rejection didn't deter him. It only fueled his obsession. For Bardo, Rebecca wasn't a real person with her own life and feelings. She was an image, a pure and innocent ideal that he had constructed in his mind. His letters became more frequent and more demanding. He felt a personal connection to her, one that existed only in his head. He believed they had a special relationship. The turning point came when Rebecca starred in the S989 film, Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. In the movie, she had a love scene. For Bardo, seeing the innocent Rebecca he had idolized in such a scene shattered his fantasy. In his twisted mind, she had betrayed him. His adoration curdled into a violent rage. He felt that Hollywood had corrupted her, and now, in his distorted reality, she needed to be punished. This is where the story takes an even more sinister turn and highlights a terrifying loophole that existed at the time. Bardo decided he had to find Rebecca. How could a complete stranger locate a famous actress's home address? It was chillingly easy. He hired a private investigator. For a small fee, the investigator went to the California Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, and simply requested Rebecca Sheffer's home address. At the time, this was legal and shockingly common. The DMV handed over her address without a second thought. Armed with this critical piece of information, Bardo began to plot. He tried to purchase a handgun, but was turned away because of a history of mental health issues. Undeterred, he had his brother buy a Ruger GP100 handgun for him. His determination was absolute. He traveled back to Los Angeles, this time not with a teddy bear, but with a loaded gun and Rebecca's address in his pocket. On the morning of July 18, 1989, Bardo arrived at Rebecca's apartment building in the West Hollywood area. He buzzed her intercom. Rebecca, who was expecting a script to be delivered for her Godfather audition, answered. She came down to the lobby and opened the security door. Bardo showed her a letter and a photo she had previously sent him. They spoke briefly. She was polite but reportedly asked him not to come to her home again. He left, seemingly without incident. But Bardo didn't go far. He walked to a nearby diner, had a meal, and then, his mind stewing in resentment and rage, he decided to go back. About an hour later, he returned to her apartment building and buzzed again. When Rebecca opened the door this time, she was reportedly annoyed. According to Bardo's later confession, she said something like, "You came to my door again." What happened next is the stuff of nightmares. Without another word, Bardo pulled out the handgun and shot her point blank in the chest. As she fell, her last word was a question. Why? Bardo fled the scene, and a neighbor who heard the shot and screams called for help. Paramedics rushed Rebecca to the hospital, but it was too late. At just 21 years old, her vibrant life was extinguished. The aftermath was immediate and profound. A manhunt for the killer began. The next day, Bardo was found wandering in traffic back in Tucson, Arizona, screaming that he had killed Rebecca Sheffer. He confessed to the crime immediately, showing no remorse at first, only a strange sense of accomplishment that he was now famous to. During his trial, prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, including his letters and his detailed confession. His defense team argued that he was mentally ill, suffering from schizophrenia, and that his obsession was a product of his illness. They tried to paint a picture of a troubled young man who couldn't distinguish fantasy from reality, but the prosecution argued that his actions were premeditated. He hired a private investigator, he obtained a gun, he traveled to Los Angeles with a clear purpose. It was murder, pure and simple. The court agreed. Bardo was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he remains to this day. But the story doesn't end there. Rebecca Sheffer's tragic death was a massive wake-up call for Hollywood and for the country. It exposed the dark side of celebrity and the terrifying vulnerability of public figures. How could someone's personal information, like their home address, be so easily accessible? Her death directly led to the creation of the nation's first anti-stalking laws. In 1990, California passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, which prevents the DMV from releasing private addresses. This law was later adopted at the federal level, protecting millions of people. Her death also led to the formation of the first specialized police unit in the country dedicated to stalking, the Threat Management Unit of the Los Angeles Police Department. They pioneered methods to assess threats and intervene before obsession escalates to violence. In a very real way, the changes made because of Rebecca's tragedy have saved countless lives. It is a story that is supposed to keep you in suspense from the first to the last second. But the most terrifying part is that every second of it is real. Rebecca's story is a heartbreaking reminder of a life full of promise, cut short, but also a powerful legacy of change. Lauren McCluskey was a star, a promising student athlete at the University of Utah. She was smart, driven, and had a bright future ahead of her. But in just a few short weeks, her life spiraled into a nightmare that ended in the most tragic way imaginable. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about a system that failed her, a system that ignored her desperate cries for help. How could this happen? How could a young woman who did everything right be so tragically let down? Today, we're going to uncover the full story of Lauren McCluskey, a story that needs to be heard. It all started in September 2018. Lauren met a man named Melvin Rowland at a bar. He was charming, seemed like a good guy, and told her he was a 30-year-old student at a local community college. They started dating. Lauren was happy. She introduced him to her friends, and for a short time, things seemed perfect. But perfect things rarely last. A few weeks into their relationship, Lauren's friends grew suspicious of Melvin. They did a little digging online, and what they found was shocking. Melvin Rowland wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't 30, he was 37. He wasn't a student. And most alarmingly, he was a registered sex offender who had spent years in prison for forcible sexual abuse and enticing a minor. When Lauren's friends told her what they had discovered, she was devastated but resolute. She immediately confronted Melvin and ended the relationship on October 9th. That should have been the end of it. But for Lauren, it was only the beginning of the terror. Melvin didn't take the breakup well. He began a relentless campaign of harassment and stalking. Lauren started receiving strange, manipulative text messages. Some were from numbers she didn't recognize, pretending to be friends of Melvin, telling her he had been in a car accident and was in the hospital, all in a desperate attempt to lure her back. Another message, from a different number, claimed Melvin was dead and that Lauren was to blame. Lauren knew it was him. The messages were designed to confuse her, to make her feel guilty and scared. But Lauren was smart. She saw through the lies. On October 10th, the day after she broke up with him, Lauren did exactly what you're supposed to do. She contacted the University of Utah campus police. She reported the harassment. She showed them the messages. She expressed her fear. The next day, she called again and again. Over the next 12 days, Lauren and her parents would contact the campus police more than 20 times. Each call was a new plea for help, a new piece of evidence in a growing mountain of red flags. Lauren reported that Melvin was extorting her. He threatened to release compromising photos of her unless she paid him $1,000. She was terrified of what he might do, so she paid him, hoping it would make him go away. She immediately reported the extortion to the police. This was a serious crime. Blackmail, extortion. You'd think this would trigger an urgent response, wouldn't you? But the response was anything but urgent. Lauren's case was passed from one officer to another. One detective assigned to her case was on a few days off and didn't even look at her file until days later. No one seemed to grasp the escalating danger she was in. Lauren told the police she was worried Melvin might be trying to lure her into a trap. She specifically told them she was scared for her life. She even did her own detective work. She discovered that Melvin Rowland had a parole officer and provided this information to the campus police, thinking it would help them understand the seriousness of the situation. A man on parole, harassing and extorting a student, this should have set off alarm bells everywhere. It didn't. The campus police made a few half-hearted attempts to contact Melvin's parole officer, but failed to follow through. They treated Lauren's case as a simple harassment issue, not a life-threatening emergency. Think about that for a moment. A young woman, repeatedly calling for help, providing concrete evidence of stalking, harassment, and extortion by a convicted felon, and the system meant to protect her is moving at a snail's pace. The detective in charge of her case didn't even run a proper background check on Melvin Rowland until after Lauren was gone. If he had, he would have seen his violent criminal history, his status as a sex offender, and his active parole. The lack of urgency is simply staggering. Lauren's parents, Jill and Matt McCluskey, were also frantically trying to get the police to act. They called, they emailed, they did everything a parent could do. They knew their daughter was in grave danger. They felt helpless, watching this unfold from a distance, trusting that the authorities would do their job. But nobody was listening. On the morning of October 22nd, Lauren's friend reported seeing Melvin on campus, carrying a gun. She immediately alerted housing officials. Think about that, a confirmed sighting of the stalker on campus with a weapon. This was reported hours before the tragedy. What was the response? Essentially, nothing. No campus-wide alert was issued. No lockdown, no active search for Melvin Rowland was initiated. The information just sat there. That evening, Lauren was on the phone with her mum, walking back to her dorm after a night class. Suddenly, her mum heard her yell, "No, no, no." Then, the line went dead. Jill McCluskey knew instantly that something terrible had happened. She immediately called 911, but it was too late. Melvin Rowland had been lying in wait for Lauren. He ambushed her in the parking lot outside her dorm, dragged her into a car, and shot her multiple times. Just a few hours later, police found Melvin Rowland at a church in Salt Lake City. As they closed in, he took his own life. In the aftermath, the failures of the University of Utah Police Department were laid bare. An independent investigation revealed a shocking list of errors, missed opportunities, and systemic breakdowns. Officers failed to recognize the clear signs of escalating danger. They didn't share information properly. They didn't take Lauren's reports seriously. The detective assigned to her case admitted he didn't know how to look up someone's criminal history or parole status. The university had all the information it needed to intervene and potentially save Lauren's life, but due to incompetence and indifference, they failed to connect the dots. Lauren did everything right. She reported the abuse. She provided evidence. She followed up relentlessly. It was the system that failed her at every single turn. Lauren's parents, Jill and Matt, channeled their grief into action. They filed a lawsuit against the University of Utah, not just for money, but for change. In 2020, they reached a settlement for $13.5 million. But more importantly, they forced the university to acknowledge its failures and to implement meaningful reforms. They also started the Lauren McCluskey Foundation, dedicated to improving campus safety, supporting student athletes, and honoring Lauren's memory. Her story has become a catalyst for change across the country, leading to new laws and policies aimed at protecting victims of dating violence and stalking on college campuses. Lauren's law has been implemented in Utah and is inspiring similar legislation elsewhere, requiring colleges to have clear protocols for responding to stalking and to work more closely with local law enforcement. The story of Lauren McCluskey is a heartbreaking reminder of what can happen when we don't listen to victims. It's a call to action for all of us to take dating, violence, and stalking seriously. These are not minor issues. They are indicators of potentially lethal violence. Lauren's legacy is not just one of tragedy, but one of change. Her voice, which was ignored when she was alive, is now being heard loud and clear through the work of her foundation and the reforms she inspired. We have a responsibility to keep her story alive, to learn from these catastrophic mistakes, and to ensure that no other student has to cry out for help, only to be met with silence. What if the person you trusted, the one you went to help, was secretly plotting your end? This isn't a horror movie script. It's the chilling true story of Teresa Halbach, a vibrant young photographer whose life was cut short in a case that would capture the world's attention and spark endless debate. On Halloween of 2005, 25-year-old Teresa Halbach was on a routine assignment. She was a freelance photographer, working for Auto Trader magazine, and her job that day was to take pictures of a minivan at the Avery Salvage Yard in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin. The client was Stephen Avery. Teresa was familiar with the location. She had been there before to photograph vehicles for him. She called ahead to confirm the appointment and let her client know she was on her way. After that call, she was never heard from again. For 3 days, Teresa's family and friends grew increasingly worried. It was completely out of character for her not to be in touch. Her mother reported her missing on November 3rd. The search began, and the last known place Teresa was headed became the focal point of the investigation. The Avery Salvage Yard. Now, to understand the gravity of this situation, you need to know a little about Stephen Avery. Avery was not just any resident of Manitowoc County. He had recently been released from prison after serving 18 years for a wrongful conviction. DNA evidence exonerated him of a brutal assault he didn't commit. He was a local celebrity of sorts, a symbol of a flawed justice system. He had filed a $36 million lawsuit against Manitowoc County and its officials. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. As investigators descended on the sprawling 40-acre salvage yard, the search for Teresa intensified. It was a massive, cluttered property filled with thousands of junked cars, sheds, and trailers. On November 5th, a volunteer search party made a grim discovery. Partially hidden under some branches and car parts was Teresa's vehicle, a dark green Toyota RAV4. The license plates were missing, and someone had tried to disconnect the battery. Inside the vehicle, investigators found bloodstains. The case had just taken a very dark turn. The discovery of the car on the Avery property immediately cast suspicion on Stephen Avery. The investigation zeroed in on him and his family. The salvage yard became a massive crime scene, meticulously combed by law enforcement from multiple agencies. And then, the discoveries started rolling in, each one more horrifying than the last. First, investigators found charred bone fragments in a burn pit right behind Stephen Avery's garage. Forensics would later confirm these fragments belonged to Teresa Halbach. This suggested a gruesome attempt to destroy her body. Then, a key to Teresa's RAV4 was found in Stephen Avery's bedroom. The key was found during the 7th search of his trailer, seemingly appearing out of nowhere after previous searches had turned up nothing. This detail would later become a major point of contention. The evidence continued to pile up. Inside Teresa's car, blood was found that matched Stephen Avery's DNA. This was a critical piece of the puzzle. Seemingly placing him inside her vehicle, more of his blood was found in the car. But here's where it gets complicated. A tiny hole was found in the top of a vial of Avery's blood that was stored in evidence from his previous wrongful conviction case. This led his defense team to propose a shocking theory, that law enforcement had planted the blood in Teresa's car to frame him. The prosecution painted a clear and disturbing picture of what happened on that Halloween afternoon. They argued that Stephen Avery had specifically requested Teresa to come to the salvage yard with sinister intentions. They claimed he lured her into his home, where he assaulted and killed her. Then, to cover his tracks, he burned her body in the fire pit behind his house and attempted to hide her car on the vast property. But the story had another shocking twist. Investigators also turned their attention to Stephen's 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey. Brendan was a quiet, introverted teenager with learning disabilities. After hours of interrogation, without a parent or lawyer present for most of it, Brendan confessed. He told investigators a horrifying story. He said he helped his uncle assault and murder Teresa in the garage. His confession was detailed, graphic, and seemed to fill in many of the gaps in the case. He described how they shot her and then burned her body. With Brendan's confession, the prosecution's case seemed airtight. They now had two suspects and a narrative that explained the physical evidence found at the scene. In 2007, both Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey were tried and convicted of Teresa Halbach's murder. Stephen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Brendan was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving several decades. Case closed, right? Not even close. The convictions of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey were just the beginning of a saga that would be scrutinized, debated, and re-examined for years to come. The release of the documentary series, Making a Murderer in 2015, brought the case to international attention and raised serious questions about the investigation and the trials. Viewers were presented with an alternative theory. Was it possible that Stephen Avery, a man who had already lost 18 years of his life to a wrongful conviction, was framed again? The defense argued that the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had a clear motive. Avery's $36 million lawsuit threatened to bankrupt the county and expose deep-seated corruption. They suggested that key evidence, like the car key and the blood, was planted. let's look at the key again. 2 officers from the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, who were specifically told not to be involved in the search due to the conflict of interest from Avery's lawsuit, were the ones who found it. Lieutenant James Lenk and Sergeant Andrew Colborne were searching Avery's bedroom. Colborne allegedly shook a bookcase, and the key, which had been missed in multiple previous searches, just fell out. To the defense, this was too convenient to be a coincidence. And what about Brendan Dassey's confession? Legal experts and psychologists have widely criticized the interrogation techniques used on him. They argue that the investigators fed him details of the crime, and his desire to please the authority figures led him to create a false confession. His story changed multiple times, and many of the details he provided didn't match the physical evidence. For example, he claimed Teresa was shot in the garage, but no blood or DNA evidence was found there to support this. His conviction was actually overturned by a federal judge in 2016, who called the confession involuntary, but that decision was later reversed by a higher court. Brendan remains in prison today. So, what are we left with? On one hand, you have a mountain of physical evidence pointing to Stephen Avery. His DNA in her car on his property, her bone fragments in his burn pit, and her car key in his bedroom. To the prosecution and Teresa's family, the case is clear. Justice was served. On the other hand, you have a series of highly questionable circumstances. A police department with a motive to frame him, the suspicious discovery of key evidence, and a coerced confession from a vulnerable teenager. For Avery's supporters, these aren't just minor inconsistencies. They are signs of a profound miscarriage of justice. The truth of what happened to Teresa Halbach on that fateful Halloween remains trapped between these 2 conflicting narratives. Was Stephen Avery a cold-blooded killer who cleverly tried to use his past wrongful conviction as a shield? Or was he the perfect scapegoat, framed by a system that wanted to see him gone for good? The case leaves us with uncomfortable questions about our justice system, the power of law enforcement, and the very nature of truth itself. One thing is certain: a young woman named Teresa Halbach lost her life, and her family lost a daughter and a sister. Her memory is often overshadowed by the legal drama, but she is the true victim at the heart of this tragic story. What do you think happened? Do you believe the evidence points to a guilty man, or do you see the signs of a setup? This case continues to evolve, with new appeals and legal challenges still underway. It's a story that refuses to end, a puzzle that may never be fully solved. Can you imagine receiving over 15,000 text messages from your new girlfriend over 4 years, only to discover she was murdered just 2 weeks after you started dating? This isn't the plot of a psychological thriller. It's the chilling, true story of Kari Farver and the bizarre, terrifying deception that hid her murder for years. It all began in 2012 in Omaha, Nebraska. Dave Krupa, a recently single father, was enjoying his newfound freedom. He wasn't looking for anything serious, and he made that clear to the women he dated. One of those women was Kari Farver, a vibrant and dedicated single mother. They met online and hit it off immediately. Their first date was great, and Kari ended up spending the night. As she was leaving Dave's apartment the next morning, she had a strange encounter. She passed another woman in the hallway, a woman named Liz Gordy. Liz was also someone Dave had been seeing casually. They exchanged a brief, awkward glance, a seemingly insignificant moment that would later prove to be monumental. Dave and Kari continued to see each other for a couple of weeks. Everything seemed normal. Then, on the morning of November 13, 2012, Kari was supposed to leave Dave's apartment for work. He received a text from her saying she wanted to move in together. This was completely out of character. Dave, who had been upfront about not wanting a serious relationship, was taken aback. He gently reminded her of their agreement. The response he got was shocking. A barrage of angry, hostile texts came flooding in. "Fine. I don't ever want to see you again. Go away. I'm dating someone else. I hate you." And then she vanished. At first, everyone, including Dave and Kari's own mother, Nancy, assumed she had just run off. Kari had mentioned struggling with her mental health before, so maybe she just needed a break. The texts continued, not just to Dave, but to her family and friends as well. She told her mother she had taken a new job in Kansas and needed to start immediately. She missed her son's 15th birthday, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. All explained away with texts about her demanding new life. For her mother, Nancy, it was heartbreaking, but the constant stream of messages, though sporadic and cold, provided a sliver of hope that her daughter was alive somewhere. For Dave Krupa, life became a living nightmare. The texts from Kari never stopped. They escalated from simple, angry messages to relentless stalking and harassment. She would text him hundreds of times a day, saying she was watching him. She described what he was wearing, what car he was driving, and even mentioned seeing him with Liz Golia, his on-again, off-again girlfriend. The messages were filled with venom. "I'm going to destroy your life. I will not be ignored." The harassment wasn't just digital. Dave's property was vandalized. His car was keyed. He started seeing a shadowy figure lurking around his apartment complex. The stress was unbearable. He reported the stalking to the police, but with Kari texting and seemingly alive, their hands were tied. It was a classic case of he said, she said. Meanwhile, Liz Golia, the other woman, seemed to be a victim too. She told Dave that Kari was harassing her as well. She received threatening messages and claimed her house was vandalized and her pets were threatened. She and Dave found themselves bonded by this shared trauma, this mutual torment at the hands of a woman they both believed was consumed by jealous rage. Their relationship deepened, and they leaned on each other for support. Liz seemed to be the only one who understood what Dave was going through. She was his rock in a storm of digital terror. For 4 long years, this went on. 4 years of constant fear for Dave. 4 years of false hope for Kari's mother, Nancy. The Kari persona was incredibly convincing. She sent messages that referenced inside jokes and past events, details that seemingly only Kari father could know. The police investigation stalled time and time again. Without a body, without concrete evidence of foul play, Kari was simply a missing person who was actively communicating. But a couple of dedicated detectives, Ryan Avis and Jim Doty, couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. They decided to take a fresh look at the mountains of digital evidence. They pored over thousands of texts, emails, and social media posts. And that's when they started noticing inconsistencies. The grammar and syntax in the messages didn't quite match Kari's old writing style. The digital footprint was also strange. The messages were being sent through a variety of apps and services that masked the sender's location, a level of technical sophistication that seemed unusual for Kari. The turning point came when investigators got a warrant for Liz Golia's electronic devices. As they combed through her phone and tablet, they made a shocking discovery. They found a photo of a decomposing human foot. The foot had a distinctive tattoo on it, a Chinese symbol for mother. Nancy Rainey confirmed it was the same tattoo her daughter Kari had. This was the grim proof they had been missing. Kari father wasn't hiding. She was dead. Suddenly, the entire 4-year ordeal snapped into a terrifying new focus. The detectives realized that Liz Golia wasn't a fellow victim. She was the mastermind. She was the one sending all those messages. She had been impersonating Kari's father for years, creating an elaborate, cruel hoax to manipulate Dave and cover up a murder. With this new evidence, the police dug deeper into Liz's life. They found she had downloaded dozens of apps to fake her location and schedule text messages. She had spent countless hours crafting this false narrative. They even found deleted photos on her device, including a picture of Kari's car, a Ford Explorer, parked near a remote park. When they searched that area, they found the car, hidden away for years. Inside, on the passenger seat floorboard, they found a single, faint bloodstain underneath the seat cover. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Kari. The story that emerged was horrifying. Investigators believe that on November 13, 2012, the day Kari disappeared, Liz Golia ambushed her in her own car, likely in the parking lot of Dave's apartment complex. She stabbed Kari to death, put her body in the trunk, and drove away. She then abandoned the car and disposed of the body, which has tragically never been found. And then, for the next 4 years, Liz executed her monstrous plan. She became Kari. She used the information she had gathered while dating Dave, and likely from snooping on Kari's social media, to create a believable persona. She sent texts to Kari's family to keep them from getting too suspicious. And she terrorized Dave, creating a shared enemy to draw him closer to her. She even went so far as to burn down her own house, with her pets inside, and blame it on Kari to further paint herself as a victim. The level of deception was staggering. Liz had fooled everyone: Dave, Kari's family, and the police. She had orchestrated a campaign of terror while positioning herself as the sympathetic girlfriend. In court, the digital evidence was overwhelming. The thousands of messages, the incriminating photos, and the tracking data on Liz's phone all pointed to her guilt. In 2017, Liz Golia was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The story of Kari Fava is a terrifying reminder of how technology can be twisted for evil. It's a story of obsession, deception, and a murder hidden in plain sight for 4 years. All buried under an avalanche of text messages from a killer pretending to be her victim. It's a case that haunts you long after you hear it. A true-life horror story that feels too bizarre to be real. Have you ever heard of someone vanishing into thin air from the middle of the ocean? It sounds like something out of a movie, but for the Bradley family, it was a waking nightmare. This is the baffling story of Amy Lynn Bradley, a vibrant 23-year-old who disappeared from a cruise ship in 1998, leaving behind a trail of questions that still haunt investigators and her family to this day. It was March 1998. Amy, her parents, Ron and Ivor, and her brother Brad, were on a Caribbean cruise aboard the Royal Caribbean ship Rhapsody of the Seas. It was supposed to be a fun family vacation. Amy was a recent college graduate, a talented basketball player, and had a bright future ahead of her. She had just gotten her lifeguard certification and was looking forward to starting a new job. The family was enjoying their time together, exploring the ship and the beautiful ports of call. The cruise started in Puerto Rico and was heading to Caruco. On the night of March 23rd, the family enjoyed dinner and a show. Later, Amy and her brother Brad went to the ship's nightclub. Witnesses saw them dancing and having a good time. According to Brad, they left the club together around 1 a.m. The last few hours before she vanished are a blur of conflicting accounts and strange encounters. The family returned to their cabin. Ron, Amy's father, remembers seeing her asleep on the balcony couch around 5:15 a.m. on March 24th. He said he couldn't sleep and went out for a moment, and she was there. When he returned to the room just a short while later, around 6 a.m., Amy was gone. All that remained were her sandals, left neatly on the floor. She had taken her cigarettes and lighter, but nothing else. Her purse, her ID, all her belongings were still in the cabin. The family immediately knew something was terribly wrong. Amy would never just wander off without telling them where she was going, especially not in the middle of the ocean. They frantically alerted the ship's crew. But this is where the story takes its first dark turn. The family claims the crew was slow to react. They asked for an announcement to be made, for the ship not to dock in Curacao, and for a ship-wide search to be conducted. They felt their pleas were initially dismissed. The crew allegedly told them it was common for young people to stay out late and that she would probably turn up. By the time the ship docked in Curacao, Amy was officially declared missing. A search of the ship was finally conducted, but it turned up nothing. Not a single trace of Amy. The local authorities in Curacao and the FBI were brought in, but the crucial early hours had been lost. The ship was a floating city with over 2,000 passengers and hundreds of crew members. Finding clues after everyone had disembarked was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The family's investigation, however, uncovered some disturbing details. They learned that during the night at the club, some of the crew members had been paying an unusual amount of attention to Amy. Her brother Brad said a waiter named Yellow seemed particularly fixated on her. Other passengers later came forward with their own unsettling stories. One remembered seeing Amy early that morning with a man who had a tattoo of a Tasmanian devil on his shoulder. Another witness, a taxi driver in Curacao, claimed a frantic woman matching Amy's description approached his cab that morning, saying she desperately needed to get to a phone because her family was on the ship and she was in trouble. But before he could help her, several men grabbed her and forced her into another vehicle. Could Amy have been targeted? The theory that she was abducted by crew members and taken off the ship against her will quickly became the most prominent one. Her father, Ron, recalled a strange interaction earlier in the cruise. A photographer had taken a picture of Amy and her brother, and one of the ship's band members had made a strange comment to him, saying, "I see you with my girl." It was unsettling enough that Ron remembered it vividly after she disappeared. The mystery deepened with several potential sightings of Amy in the years that followed. In 1998, just a few months after she vanished, a Canadian tourist in Curacao saw a woman who looked strikingly like Amy walking on a beach with two men. She appeared to be under their control. The tourist said the woman looked at him with pleading eyes, as if begging for help. Then, in 1999, came one of the most chilling pieces of potential evidence. A US Navy sailor on shore leave in Curacao visited a local establishment. He claimed a woman approached him and told him her name was Amy Bradley and she needed help. But, before he could react, she was whisked away by two men. He was so shaken by the encounter that he didn't report it immediately, fearing he would get in trouble for being in an off-limits area. He later identified Amy from a photo. Perhaps the most disturbing potential sighting came in 2005. The Bradley family received an anonymous email containing photographs of a woman in lingerie who bore a striking resemblance to Amy. The woman in the photos looked distressed and seemed to be posing against her will. Forensic experts analyzed the images. While some features matched, they couldn't definitively confirm it was her. The source of the photos was a website, but investigators could never trace the original sender. For the Bradley family, it was another agonizing dead end, a glimpse of a horrifying possibility. Was Amy a victim of human trafficking? It's a terrifying thought, but it aligns with the few clues that have surfaced. Her family firmly believes she was taken and is still alive somewhere, being held against her will. Her father has said he believes the crew members who were overly friendly were part of a plan to abduct her. The fact that she vanished just as the ship was about to dock in a foreign port seems too coincidental to be an accident. Other theories exist, of course. Some have suggested she fell overboard. The family rejects this. Amy was a strong swimmer and a certified lifeguard. It was a calm morning. If she had fallen, it's likely someone would have heard or seen something. The ship's railings were high, making an accidental fall difficult. Could she have taken her own life? Her family says this is completely out of character. She was happy, had plans for the future, and there were no signs of depression or distress. She loved her family and was excited about her life. Another theory is that she disappeared voluntarily to start a new life. But why would she leave all her belongings, her money, and her identification behind? And why has she never contacted her family, whom she was incredibly close to? It just doesn't add up. For over 2 decades, the Bradley family has never given up hope. They've spent their life savings, traveled the world following leads, and worked tirelessly to keep Amy's story in the public eye. They've appeared on shows like Dr. Phil and Unsolved Mysteries, hoping that someone, somewhere, knows something. There's a significant reward for information leading to her return, or for information about her whereabouts. The case of Amy Lynn Bradley remains one of the most perplexing and heartbreaking missing person cases of our time. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly a dream vacation can turn into an enduring mystery. She had distinctive tattoos, a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball on her shoulder, a sun on her lower back, a gecko on her navel, and a Chinese symbol on her right ankle. These details have been shared countless times in the hopes that someone might recognize her. What really happened to Amy on that cruise ship? Was she the victim of a calculated abduction? Did she accidentally fall overboard in the pre-dawn hours? Or is there another, even darker explanation we haven't considered? The questions hang in the air, unanswered. The ocean holds its secrets close, but Amy's family holds on to hope, waiting for the day they might finally get an answer. Her case is a powerful testament to a family's undying love and their refusal to let her be forgotten. If you have any information about the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, please contact the FBI. Her family is still waiting for her to come home.